Hi friends, welcome to today's video. You have seen the title and the thumbnail of this video. Today I'm going to be talking about the best and the worst books that I have read in 2024. In general, I feel like I had a decent reading year, but most of the books that I read, they were just mediocre. There were a few that stood out as really good and a few that were really bad in my opinion. I feel like my worst books of the year are going to be very unpopular opinions, so let's start on the positive note. Let's start with the best. So the first book that I want to talk about is The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is the first book in the Hierarchy series. The second book comes out in 2025 and I'm pretty excited about it. So this is an adult high fantasy. It is set in ancient Rome, but then you have a lot of magical elements with it. And the majority of book one is set in a school setting. Now, I wouldn't say it is necessarily a magic school because people inside of the school are not allowed to use magic. I feel like this story has a very good balance between world building, setting, and also character developments because we really get all of those elements kind of in equal parts. I really enjoyed reading about all of these characters. I wouldn't say the protagonist is 100% likable. He's a little bit morally gray, but he's definitely an interesting person to follow. He builds many relationships that also have very interesting dynamics. We have a lot of friendship. There is a tiny hint, a little bit of romance, but not really. Please don't take it as if there is an actual romance in this book. No, there's just a hint of an interest. But there is a lot of friendships that you don't know if you can actually trust these people. There is a lot of betrayal. There are a lot of characters whom you think are enemies, but they're actually friends. And in general, I enjoy so much the scope of how complex and diverse character relationships and dynamics were in this book. As I said, the setting of this book is also really fun. Most of it is set in the school, so you get quite a bit of academia and dark academia. And there are also so many secrets that we are yet to uncover in the following books that I am just so excited to continue this series. Personally, I would say I am quite a sensitive reader, and while I do really love adult fantasy, I don't really like when there is too much gore just for the sake of gore, and this book really doesn't have that. It is definitely out there. Some of the things that are happening are pretty terrifying, but I thought that it was done in such a great way where it would add to the complexity of the world, but it wouldn't be there just for the sake of the shock factor. And if you're looking for adult fantasy, I would highly recommend this series. This was definitely one of my top reads of 2024. Next, I want to talk about Words of Radiance, book 2 in the Stormlight Archive series, another epic adult high fantasy series. I personally enjoyed book 2 so much more than the first one. I know that a lot of people really love The Way of Kings. Personally, I found it a little bit difficult to get into it. So The Way of Kings was a bit of a slower read for me. I definitely loved seeing Kaladin's backstory and also seeing his character development. I enjoyed the ending of Way of Kings a lot, don't get me wrong. However, personally, Words of Radiance is going to be my favorite book in the Stormlight Archive series that I have read. I still have quite a way to go. The Words of Radiance focuses mainly on Gallant, and personally, I absolutely love Gallant. There are so many dark secrets about her that you discover throughout Words of Radiance. Also, something that I really enjoyed is that at the beginning of the series, we are following a set of multiple characters and all of them are very far away from each other in this world. However, during Words of Radiance, those characters start to actually come closer together, and it is so incredibly interesting to read about their interactions. Now, if you don't want to have any spoilers for Words of Radiance, please skip to whatever time I'm going to put on the screen. But I just want to talk about one aspect of Words of Radiance that would be a bit of a spoiler, not a huge one. Okay, but can we please talk about Gallant and Kaladin interactions? I love this, whatever relationship that is. I mean, they clearly thought about each other, and I'm so interested to see where this relationship is going. Obviously, Gallant is set to marry Adeline, and also they do have very beautiful, fun chemistry. But Kaladin and Gallant is just an interaction that I want to see more from the Stormlight Archive. Anyway, I found Words of Radiance to be very fast-paced, even though it is like a 1200-page book, and I just enjoyed being back in this world so much, especially now that it was the second installment in the series and I was familiar with the world and with the magic system. And even though there are still so many questions about what is going on, I felt that sense of familiarity and comfort being back in this fictional world, and I enjoyed it so much. My only complaint about this series are those interludes / prologues that you get in between different certain parts of the book, it just takes you out of the story so much that I didn't enjoy them quite as much. I really wanted to skip them. But regardless of that, I am very interested to see where the story is going, and I will be continuing with the series for sure. The next book on my list completely blew me away. I still think about it on a daily basis, and what was that book? It left me speechless. And that book is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. So the premise of this book is that we're following the main protagonist, who is a young girl, and she's in a cage with another 40 women, and they're in this cage that is patrolled by security. The security guards give them food once in a while. Essentially, that is their life. They just all live in this cage. The girl that we are following is the youngest one of all of them, and she is the one who was brought to this cage when she was a child, so she doesn't remember any of her life outside of this cage. The rest of the women do remember that they had a life before this cage, but it is only like a scattered memories. They don't really have a clear picture of who they were, but most importantly, how they got there and what happened in between. And then one day an accident happens and these women are able to escape the cage. And from there, I'm not gonna say another word. One thing about this book that I feel like I kind of wish I knew before going into it is that you're not going to get any answers from it. There is no explanation. You're just given a situation and you need to figure out what all of this means on your own. I was so absolutely shocked and intrigued by this book. I couldn't stop talking about it to everyone that I know after I've read it. It is such an interesting journey and such an interesting world. This book truly is one big mystery that you have to uncover for yourself and draw the conclusions and answers that you think are best for yourself. This book was an experience like no other. It was absolutely fascinating and weird, and I am definitely going to reread this book in the future, and probably I won't pick up more details to kind of try to solve this mystery for myself. It was a very interesting, weird, fun experience, and I highly recommend it if you're interested in something like that. The next two books that I want to talk about are a duology, and that is A Robot and the Monk series by Becky Chambers. So the books being A Psalm for the Wild-Built and A Prayer for the Crowned Shy. I absolutely adored these two books. These are such quick reads. Each of them is about 150-ish pages, but honestly, the font is so big that I would say it's even less than that. This is a cozy sci-fi series. We're following the main protagonist, a monk. World robots have gained consciousness and they have decided that they want their own independence, and humans respected that. So robots actually live in the wilderness and they have their own society that has nothing to do with humans. So the main character goes into the wilderness and founds this robot named Moscap. Moscap really wants to learn more about humans, so they decide to travel together and help each other. Their relationship is absolutely precious. It is so wonderful to see how their characters complement each other, and just in general, the trust that they build for each other, the love and the support that they have for each other is wonderful. But also at the same time, it's really funny because the robot Moscap is very awkward. He doesn't know any social norms or in general what people do and how people operate. So he asks a lot of inappropriate, funny, stupid and awkward questions. In general, this book is like a warm cup of tea and a fuzzy blanket over you. It is so comforting. It is so sweet. Yes, it is very optimistic about humanity's future. In general, Becky Chambers' writing is very, very optimistic. But if you feel like you need that, if you need something to pick you up, something to be uplifting and hopeful, this is a great series to get into. Also, I feel like these two books are a great gateway into sci-fi, and a lot of people feel intimidated because they associate sci-fi with space or physics or science, and I mean, it's literally science fiction, right? But I know that sci-fi can be very intimidating, and if you tend to enjoy cozier books, I would highly recommend checking this out because it is cozy sci-fi and there is zero science in it. It just has good vibes and good vibes only. Also, if you have enjoyed the recent movie that came out, The Wild Robot, even though plot-wise those two have nothing in common, but the setting of a robot, a piece of a machinery being out in the wilderness among wild nature, these books have that same kind of atmosphere. So I feel like if you enjoyed the movie, you might really like the setting of this book. I enjoyed this book so much. It was just a breath of fresh air. It was comforting, it was cozy, great time, and I think I would reread this series in the future when I need something that is optimistic and that is going to just make me smile. Next, I want to talk about Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This was the first year that I tried any of V.E. Schwab's writing, and while I didn't really love The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue as much as I thought I would, I really enjoyed Gallant so much. We're following the main character Olivia. She's an orphan and she doesn't know anything about her parents except that she has a diary of her mom, and in this diary her mom seems to be spiraling into madness, and she talks a lot about Gallant and how Olivia should stay away from Gallant. And one day Olivia receives a letter from her uncle that she never knew that she had, inviting her to Gallant, and apparently it is a mansion. Apparently it is a mansion that has belonged to her family for generations, and from there she meets her distant relatives but also starts to uncover the secrets and the horrors of what is Gallant, and a lot of the things about her mom's diary start to make sense. Personally, I thought the story was so emotional. I could not stop worrying so much about Olivia, and when she finally got to this mansion, even though all of the horrors and terrible secrets that this family has, she felt so much the sense of belonging, and for the first time in her life she had someone. She was not alone, and that made me so incredibly emotional. Also, I really enjoyed the overall tone of this book. It's kind of a gothic but very soft horror. I feel like if you've never read horror, and if you are interested but if you are sensitive or don't want something that's too gory, too gruesome, I feel like this is a perfect book for you. It does have a bit of a spooky elements, but it's almost like children's nightmare stories. Realistically, I don't know if I will ever reread this book. I feel like one time reading it was enough for me, but who knows, maybe in the future I would want to pick it up again. But I really love the atmosphere and the moodiness of this book, and I definitely want to read more books by Victoria Schwab. I also have two honorable mentions, and those are The Martian and Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Both of these books were rereads for me, that's why I'm not including them in my main list. I absolutely adore both of these books. Both are 5-star reads for me. I am Andy Weir's #1 biggest fan, and whenever he comes out with a new book, I will run to the bookstore and it will be the best day ever. Both of these books are science fiction. Both follow male main character who is in quite a tricky situation. The Martian is following a man who is left stranded on Mars, while Project Hail Mary is following a man who is in a spaceship in the middle of a different star system trying to save the humanity. I absolutely adore these two books. I really love these two protagonists. I also really love the pacing. These books are so incredibly immersive. You are constantly at the edge of your seat, not knowing what happens next, and I have nothing but good things to say about these two books and Andy Weir as an author in general. These are two books that I will probably never stop talking about. Anyway, now is the time to go into the worst books of the year, and honestly these are going to be some very unpopular opinions. The first one on my list is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have nothing against Taylor Jenkins Reid as an author. In fact, I actually really love her, even though I don't like a lot of her books, because her books are extremely fast-paced and they're so easy to fly through. I really love the plot lines that she picks. However, not every book of hers I like, and it's always I either really like them or really dislike them. And Daisy Jones and the Six is definitely one of those books that I strongly dislike. First of all, I did not like any of the characters, and I understand that, you know, main characters can be unlikable. I had absolutely zero sympathy for any of them. This is a book about the rock band in the 70s or 80s, and we are uncovering their story through interview with a few of their members. And through the entire book I kept thinking, why would I care? I couldn't bring myself to have any emotional interest and attachment to knowing what happened to them and what is their story, how they became popular, and so on. And when we got to the plot twist, I was like, oh, this is why I was supposed to care? But I still don't. This plot twist is very similar to Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. If you didn't like that book, I feel like you would not like Daisy Jones and the Six. I personally didn't like either of those books. The only thing I can say is that it is extremely fast-paced. I flew through this book within the span of 24 hours. It is so easy to read. It is so fast. It can be seen as entertaining, but I just couldn't connect to the story at all. And the irony is that the name of this channel is actually inspired by this book, even though I didn't like it. So, you know, I thought Daisy Jones and the Six sounded kind of nice, and then I wanted to make it into a bookish theme, so I decided to go with Xenia and the Books. So This is a little story of the reason why my channel is named the way that it is, but yeah, it is named after a book that I gave 2 stars to. If that opinion is not going to cancel me yet, the next book on my list is Happy Place by Emily Henry. I am not one of the readers who loves every single release of Emily Henry. I do appreciate some of her books. I gave Book Lovers 5 stars. I recently also read Funny Story and it was also really good. Beach Read, I was kind of it was good, but it wasn't great. So I was a little bit wary going into Happy Place because of that reason, but also because I don't really like second chance romance. And surprisingly, or rather not, this book didn't work for me. I have to say I really love the setting of this book, and in general, every Emily Henry book is set in such a nice atmospheric place. It is always a small town. However, again, I just didn't like any of these characters. I could not see the main 2 characters together. They broke up after 6 years of being together, and the only thing I could think about was, good for you. Please don't get together, because I don't think they are right for each other. I didn't see what happened for them to get together again. I just felt like there was no character development, there was no learning curve, there was no tension and people starting to trust each other more. It was going from, oh my god, we broke up, we're strangers, to everything is fixed, we're good again. How did we get there? I don't know. Also, I really didn't like the friend group in this book. They're all just annoying and toxic, and honestly I wanted this main character to get out of this entire circle and go live her life and be successful and happy without all of these people, because I just didn't feel like it was a good environment and it was not enjoyable to read about. And I do really think, for me, felt like the weakest Emily Henry book I have read so far. I know that a lot of people really love it, and I'm glad that it works for so many people, but I unfortunately couldn't appreciate this book. Another booktok, Booktube's favorite, is A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I gave 2 stars. The first time I read this book, I DNF'd it at 150 pages. However, a year later, for some reason, I didn't get the memo and I thought, hey, let me read this again. That didn't make much sense, but I did anyway, and it was not much better the second time around. I did finish it. I understand the entertainment value that these books have, and I absolutely understand how people enjoy them. However, for me, some aspects of this book were so bad that I could not look past them in order to enjoy it to its full capacity. The first 200 pages I was enjoying so much, but I was enjoying it because I thought the writing wasn't the greatest, but it was kind of entertaining and serious at times, and I thought, okay, maybe it could just be a popcorn entertaining read and nothing more. But as the story progressed, I just felt like it could have been done into a really fun, entertaining read if it had just a few tweaks. Specifically, there was one chapter where you get the entire world building and the entire explanation for the whole magic system and the history of this world, all dumped at you in one chapter, and it is a dialogue between 2 characters. I feel like it could have been spread out a little bit more. Also, the ending of this book had a very different tone to the beginning, and it just all felt like a scramble of a few different ideas put together. I didn't love the main female character. I don't think she's meant to be very likable. She is a bit annoying. She has not done a single proactive thing throughout the entire book. Everything that happened, well, actually no, the book starts with her doing something, but then the rest of it is just things happening to her, every single possible character along the way helping her while she is doing all the wrong decisions, and it was very frustrating to read. Romance of this book was okay. It wasn't the greatest, but it was fine. I could overlook the romance if other elements were a little bit stronger. Another thing that annoyed me a little bit about it is how gore some of the scenes were. They just felt like they don't fit with the rest of the narrative. It almost felt like they were there to make it more of a high fantasy, make it more of a high stakes world, but they just felt out of place. They broke the story more than they added to the world building. So it wasn't, unfortunately, a greatest read for me. Wish I could enjoy it as much as everyone else, but unfortunately I felt like it was a pretty weak work of fiction. Another super hyped book that I didn't really enjoy this year was The Silent Patient. I had quite high expectations because so many people rave about this book. We are following a psychiatrist who gets a new job in this clinic. There is a lady who supposedly killed her husband, and then since that incident she hasn't spoken a single word, and he is convinced that that he can get her talking, so he decides to take this job and he becomes her psychiatrist. The plot twist of this book unfortunately was very predictable. I didn't really love the characters of this book either. I felt like they were all very plain. I didn't actually have any character, and something that annoyed me was that there were so many events that didn't actually connect to the main plot line. It was almost like there were pieces of narrative that were there just for the sake of the page count, but they didn't have any role in the main plot twist, so it was a bit of a disappointment. I read this book a few months ago and I already don't remember so many plot points and so much of what happens in this book, which is never a good sign. So unfortunately this book for me is not worth the hype. The last book that I want to talk about is Pines by Blake Crouch. Now this is not the worst book that I have read, but I think it is the most not for me book that I have read this year. Objectively, I do think it is a pretty decent book and the story is quite interesting, but I think it is absolutely a wrong read for me. I saw that it is a sci-fi with a bit of horror elements. I love sci-fi and I thought, hey, let me try this out. However, I think that this book was way too gore and way too dark for my liking. It is truly just a lot. It is a massacre. I was disturbed and I realized that I am way too sensitive to be reading this book, but I did finish it. I really loved how fast-paced this book is. I literally flew through it. I didn't even notice how I read this entire book in a couple of days. And another thing that I didn't really appreciate about it is that it was a bit misogynistic, because every single female character in this book is introduced as, oh, she's in her mid-30s, but you can tell that she used to be somewhat beautiful and you can still see a shadow of that beauty even at her old age. And then every male character of this book is introduced as someone handsome and intelligent. We are literally meeting a person who is a pure insane evil character, the villain, and he's introduced as someone who has intelligence behind their eyes. You talk to them and you can tell this is one of the smartest people that you will ever talk to. Those descriptions absolutely killed me. So yeah, I'm definitely not going to be continuing this series. I think it was too much for me, but I do want to read the summary of books 2 and 3, get all the spoilers and see what happens without reading the books. This video was a handful. Thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it. Please let me know down in the comments what has been your best and worst book that you have read this year. Thank you so much for watching this. Don't forget to subscribe and I will catch up with you guys in another video.